Welcome out to the Transportation Policy Board. Lou tells me we've got a quorum, so we're going to call this December 10th, 2025 meeting to order. At this time, we'll need approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to get on the floor? Hear a motion? Do I hear a second? Any corrections, comments on the minutes? All in favor say aye. All opposed. Next, we'll move to the public comment period. Anyone here wishing to speak before the board today? Seeing none, we're going to move to our action items. First action item that we have is endorse the first draft of the Regional Transportation Plan for TDOT review and comment period. I'm going to turn it over to Michael to explain and for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all before we break for the holidays. As the chair mentioned, staff called you to Nashville to discuss with us this morning is the first draft of the technical document and an updated project list. Our intention today really is just to make sure you all get to see where we are before we start engaging TDOT, which we need to do fairly soon. We want to start engaging them before we break for the holiday season. So I just wanted to get that on record as having shared that with you and answered any questions that you may have. We will be asking you to endorse the first draft, but only for the purposes of just documenting that the board has seen where we are before we start engaging the state. It's really critical we start engaging with them in terms of the projects that they have in the 10-year plan, 3-year work program, the projects that they have submitted to us for our new TIP and the 2050 RTP. But maybe more importantly, we need to start sitting down with them to talk about your locally sponsored projects that are on state routes or even in some cases on the interstate system. We've got to sit down with them, share with them our cost estimates, the analysis that we've done that may identify challenges or barriers to implementation, work through all of that. So there's going to be a lot of shifts in the project list between now and the next time you see it in early 2026. So today is really just an opportunity for you to see what we're about to share with them. We'll be back in front of you in January and February with their comments. There'll be meaningful comments in terms of their perspective on the projects that you have proposed for the 2050 plan. So this is not certainly the last time you'll endorse this. You'll endorse it again in the late winter before it's released for public review and comment. There's likely to be a couple of versions of the plan before we even get to that point. Still on track to adopt in March, but contingencies in place if we need to buy ourselves more time to get the projects right. I will say, as I get into the background here and share with you where we are, that this is about, since I've been back with the MPO since 2007, this is the most work we've done to unpack the details of your projects in terms of cost estimates and challenges for implementation. And a lot of what is driving our focus on detail this time around is the work of the Project Delivery Task Force that Mayor Reed shared, and a recognition that we need to have a better view of what we're getting into when we commit to these projects. So we're not underestimating costs or underestimating timelines. And so that is a lot of what we're trying to do with getting really deep in the weeds. But we're at a point now where we've got a lot of information. Some of it's conflicting. We just need to talk with TDOT about what's what on these corridors. So we come back to you with a really good sound plan for public review comment in early 2026. So keep that in mind as we ask for your endorsement this morning. But just to remind you that this is a federally required document. We're required by federal regulations to adopt a plan every 5 years on behalf of our local governments and state partners for the metropolitan planning area, which includes the 7 counties that you all represent. We must cover a 20-year horizon. It's our tradition to cover 25 years into the future. So our planning horizon for this plan is 2050. Sounds awfully futuristic, but we'll be here before you know it. Our plan, it is important that our plan represent the true needs of our region, but at the end of the day, the feds are interested in seeing a fiscally constrained plan. So they want us to estimate future revenues, and I'll talk about our forecast here in a minute in terms of revenues. And we need to give them a balanced budget, essentially. We've got projects that we want to move forward with the federal program, and we need to demonstrate fiscal constraints to the anticipated revenue. It doesn't mean we won't showcase other needs across the region. In fact, as we kicked off this process, I had mentioned that one of our objectives is to pay more attention to those unfunded needs so we can inspire people to action, to bring more resources to bear to improve transportation across our region. And then also we have a set of regional goals and objectives that we're trying to achieve, but we also have to be mindful of what the state's trying to do through TDOT, through their planning process. And then Congress has established 10 planning factors that they want MPOs to make sure that they're addressing as they prepare their plan and as they prioritize federal funds for projects. We're all trying to work together on a shared vision for improving transportation across the nation. The current plan, as you all know, we talked about this many times, but was adopted by this body back in February 2021. The fiscally constrained portion of the plan was a $10.5 billion list of projects that is currently itemized on our website. Many of you are intimately familiar with those projects, but just to remind you, that $10.5 billion figure will be a point of comparison for you here in a minute when I get into the revenue forecast for the current 2050 plan that's underway. Remind you of the plan update progress. We kicked this off formally in January of 2025, but honestly, the plan update started in January of 2023 when we issued RFP for consultant assistance to start doing our growth forecasting and traffic forecasting. So we've been doing a lot of technical work to lay the groundwork for the call for projects that was issued in January of 2025. But you can see the rows here in gray, just all the work that we've done with you all and 3 rounds of workshops, a ton of back and forth through email, phone calls, online workshops, just to make sure we're appropriately representing the needs that you submitted to us and that we have the technical and that we deployed consultants and our in-house technical expertise to really dive into try to understand the benefits of your proposal, but also the challenges that you may face with implementation. So we recap this at each meeting, so I won't dwell here. We're at here in December where we want to share with you where we are before we turn it over for TDOT review and comment. They'll be helping to do a compliance review. The feds will also be looking at the document to make sure it is meeting all the requirements of federal law. But I think the most important part of the TDOT review is getting the details on projects correct and getting on the same page with TDOT as to what we're trying to build together over the next, in their mind, 10 years, but for our planning purposes for the next 25 years. A lot of work left over the holidays into early 2026 to keep us on track to adopt in March of 2026, which would prevent a lapse. And you'll remember, I think since I've been here, it's not a bragging point, but I think we've always adopted our plan a month or two after that lapse date. It doesn't make me feel good about that, but you all understand the tremendous amount of work that goes into these things. The penalty for not having your plan adopted on time is that the tip is frozen. So what we've done historically and what we would be prepared to do this time around, if it happens to be our circumstance, is that we would make sure that the tip is in good shape through tip amendments prior to that point in time. So we've got contingencies in place should we need more time working together to get the plan right.
Michael, I know that our staff has, and I'm sure everybody else that's around the table has been working really closely back and forth with you guys to try and get this right. Is there anything that our staffs need to do in the process with TDOT to help move that process along or make sure that they have everything that they need?
I think if we don't already know what interaction you've had with TDOT on your projects, because sometimes what you're doing is you're applying for is you're anticipating a state commitment. From our point of view, if the state hasn't told us of that commitment, it's not yet real. And so having that prior correspondence, if you have contracts in place that commit state funds or state coverage of cost overruns, knowing that is really important. If you haven't already shared it with us, we may be asking for it after TDOT gets into the weeds with us on the projects that we're proposing. But I'd be ready to share that information if you haven't already.
Okay.
All right. So ongoing activities, you all know our consultants have done a really good work looking at your projects. This is the most work we've ever done to estimate costs. And we've broken these out by phase, put a lot of effort on thinking about utilities and right-of-way this time around. But we're still working through that. Some of the projects are pretty far apart in terms of previous planning estimates and what the consultants are looking at. So often what's happening in those situations is a planning study, it may be dated, isn't adequately capturing a harder to estimate costs like utilities or right-of-way location. So we're going to just need more time to continue to work through that. It's really important that when we put a project in the plan, it's the most reasonable cost estimate as possible, because that's where we get into trouble sometimes, is that we, for whatever reason, end up lowballing the cost of a project. We start getting into engineering, design, NEPA, and we realize, oh my gosh, this is like 5 or 6, even sometimes 10 times more the cost than we thought. So now we've got costs sunk in the project and really no immediate funding to keep us moving in the pipeline, which is a very risky situation for a lot of folks. And so we really need to spend time understanding why planning estimates that had been provided to us previously and why the consultant estimates that have been calculated using more recent data out of TDOT are far apart. In some cases, it's just because the consultants were seeing more than existed in your projects. But in a lot of cases, it's just that you didn't have the resources to think through utilities and right of way to the extent that they do. So getting as close to truth as possible on those cost estimates is really important. So we're continuing to do that. Many of you have staff that have been in daily contact with our team. But I should also just say, I mean, we're not only doing the most amount of work that we've done since I've been here on this analysis, but we're doing it with folks who haven't been through this process before, on your staff, on our staff. And so I'm really proud of the amount of work that's going into this effort from both the local perspective as well as at GNRC. But we have more work to do, and just try to keep everybody in good spirits as we get through the holidays with a heavy workload. So we're doing that. We'll begin incorporating TDOT comments as we sit down with them. I think I talked to Anne Marie, who's behind me before the meeting today, and she gave me a little bit insight into some of the scheduling internally at TDOT to review their projects that they submitted to us, but also we'll be working with her and Matt's team. Well, she's on Matt's team, but working with Matt's team to schedule time to talk about your projects as well. And then we've pretty much gotten all the deliverables from consultants at this point that we're going to get for the plan itself. Still working to incorporate their technical analysis, which helps us make the case for the projects that we're submitting to the state for review. All right, moving on. We talked about this at the last meeting, but we have started posting chapters to the website at gnrc.org/RTP. There are 3 of the 6 posted as of today. Expect the other 3 to be posted by the end of the week. Where those chapters will change is that as we incorporate technical work with consultants, it may update a map here or there or a table here or there. The biggest change between what you're going to see on the website now, what you'll see early 2026 are related to the financials as we dial in on cost estimates and as we shift projects around the horizons to maintain our fiscal constraints. That's where you'll see the most dramatic shift in the document supporting our decision making from where we are now to where we'll be in March of 2026. We also have online right now the interactive map of projects that you've applied for. We have not yet assigned horizon years to those projects, and you won't see cost information when you click on those projects. We would ask that you get the detail about those projects and the other tool that I'll talk about in a minute. But the map is important because it's going to show you the location of our transportation needs across the region relative to the contextual information that defines the community needs. So where we are expecting growth, where we're expecting traffic congestion, where we're seeing challenges with roadway safety, where we have environmentally sensitive areas that communities have said are important from an environmental quality standpoint. It's important that we don't disrupt environmental assets. And when we come in close proximity, it's also important that we are documenting the need for mitigation as you begin project development in those areas. So,
do you think by any chance that this might be like a little premature in posting those? Because if somebody looks at this and sees that they might not notice that this is a project that has not yet been approved into the plan, and they take it to somebody and it grows into something that doesn't have to be just.
Yeah, I agree with the premise of your question. The application's been online for a while, though. It's how we're sharing with locals the geocoding. And it is clearly draft transportation projects, but it is a different package than what will be public when we publish the plan. But it is the way that we're getting on the same page with locals for termini and alignments. Yeah, so short of password protecting it, and then giving out the password in a public meeting. I'm not sure how to control it, but I take your point. It is really important that we're framing that information correctly for the public so they don't think it's a commitment. Yeah. And like I said, we haven't assigned dollar amounts for horizons or scheduled stages projects on the map. Okay, so draft plan highlights, just some headline numbers here for you to consider as we get into our into the project list. I'll remind you, 2050 is our long-range planning horizon, but we do have two interim horizons. We have the 2030 horizon, which aligns to the TIP that was adopted last month. So that's 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Those fiscal years compose the short-range horizon of the plan. And then there's the midterm horizon. So that would be projects that would be scheduled to be delivered between 2031 and 2040. And then there's the long-range horizon, which is our projects that would be scheduled for delivery between 2041 and 2050. Now, most of the projects that are on our needs list are projects that you would consider being present-day needs or needs 20 years ago. So a lot of the scheduling that goes into the plan is more about funding availability than timing the project according to the local condition. The local conditions already necessitate these projects, but given the limited resources, they end up getting scheduled out over 25-year period, which is why I think it's important that we focus on unfunded needs, again, to inspire folks to make tough decisions about bringing more resources to bear for our transportation challenges. The plan itself is addressing a 40% increase in population across the 7-county area. So we see or expect about 700,000 new residents in the region over the life of the plan. But we're about 2 million today in the 7 counties that y'all represent, looking at about 2.7 million by the time we get to 2050. Now, the region that GNRC represents as a whole, that those 13 counties, is expected to be over 3 million by then, but the MPO's footprint is a subset of that. So we're looking at about 2.7 million people by 2050, 64% increase in jobs, so about 800,000 new jobs that we're planning for through this plan as we identify transportation needs. We're looking at, based on our traffic forecasts, a 29% increase in regional VMT, about 17 million more miles traveled per day on our network by 2050, a 94% increase in the amount of time we are spending on the roads traveling, despite the fact that our forecasts predict that you will take fewer trips and shorter trips. The amount of time that you will spend traveling is expected to lengthen, primarily because the models are projecting about a 19-20% decrease in our travel speeds across the network because of the increase in volumes that are coming along with the growth. Now, that's assuming our existing network plus the committed projects that are already underway. Once we identify the projects we want to build, we can run the model again and see how the system's going to perform with those improvements. So that's the plan, and we will do that as well. Our revenue forecast, the reason why I pointed out a $10.5 billion budget for the 2045 plan is that the region, given I guess it's spurious because there's still a lot of general fund transfers from the Treasury to the Highway Trust Fund. But we have seen an increase in the amount of contribution that we're getting from federal formula funds since the last time we updated the plan, to the tune of, at the time we adopted that last plan, we were observing about $250 million a year in formula funds, plus the matching dollars to go along with that. That's close to $492 million a year now. So growing that at 2% annually, which is I think on par with what we've seen in terms of annual increases in the formula distributions over the last decade or so. I think that's conservative. I hope it's conservative. The 2% annual growth on that $492 million a year in federal grants and matching funds gets us to that $15.8 billion budget for the plan. And this is just the formula money, right? So many of you compete for discretionary grants. You make application directly to USDOT. That's not included in this figure. So ideally, we're positioning ourselves for even more of that money. But when it comes to fiscally constrained requirements, we're really only budgeting the formula funds. We can make some assumptions for discretionary funds if we have applications in process or we can demonstrate high rate of competition, but we try to limit the amount of discretionary funds that we assume to be coming to our region, because we don't want to overestimate those dollars and then gain a false sense of confidence and then stop doing the work we need to do to compete for those dollars. So we're looking at about a $15.8 billion budget. That's a lot of money, but remember, that is essentially present day dollar value. And what we'll need to do with our projects in the 2040 and the 2050 horizon is we need to inflate those costs to a year of expenditure. And we use a 4% annual inflation rate. So that's another key takeaway for you is even though we're assuming a 2% growth in revenue, we're assuming a 4% year over year rate of inflation on those projects. There.
Thanks. I'm guessing at the answer here based on conversations we've had internally with the Choose How You Move team, but does this account for the increase in revenue that we have now in Davidson at least?
It is in some regards. Some of the Choose How You Move revenue is in the 15.8 where it's pledged to a formula grant, and there are a couple on the list. But by and large, you're overmatching the federal program. And so this is not accounting for all the local and state money that isn't needed to match. Your success in Nashville is also going to make us more competitive for the discretionary funds that we talked about earlier. I know many of the Choose How You Move projects, I think you did a good job during the public outreach process leading up to the ballot initiative saying, if you approve this local dedicated source of funding, this is what we can deliver minimally. But we're also going to be applying for federal discretionary grants to try to upgrade these projects or speed up their delivery. So the plan will account for that, but it's not in that $15.8 billion figure.
Right. And that's the outcome we want for Nashville and Davidson. But our hope and expectation was that the plan would be of full benefit to the entire region for that reason.
The amount of money that dedicated source of revenue is pulling in, I just mentioned when we adopted the 2045 plan, we were looking at about a $250 million federal program for our region, federal and non-federal matching dollars for those formula grants. Choose How You Move is about that on its own, right? And growing over time as the city grows. So it's a significant increase in our available revenue to move transportation projects forward because of the local initiative. And I hope, it's the plan of many mayors across the table who worked hard on that enabling legislation that they can follow suit and bring more money to the table.
I have a question about the VHT. Does the model take into account traffic signal coordination and retiming and incident management? And that I know may not be able to take into account, but those are things that could reduce the VHT a little.
Yeah, there are factors in the model that try to represent delay caused by like intersection delay and things of that nature. I won't be able to address that in a detailed way, but we can sit down and talk to you about how the model, like how would we model an optimization of a corridor with the right signal technology or the right timing plan, right?
Before and after, that's
Exactly.
the model may not take that into account. It's more of on a micro,
Yeah.
level than on a larger.
We have another model. We have a micro simulation tool that is a better use for looking at optimization of individual projects. The model that I'm referencing here is looking at regional travel demand. Has a pretty wide margin of error as you start zooming into links on the network where signal timing would matter. Yeah, it's a good question. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Could you explain to me the far right column where it says local amount? I understand 80-20 match, but you go through some of these and you see none of them have a match.
Sure. I'm happy to, I'm going to end on this table. But it's a good question. That's why we're here today. I'm there. You knew I was there. I shared my slides with you before the meeting. All right, so let's go to the table. So where we are now, there's been a lot of work since our last meeting. There's a new tab on the website that we've been using together to track projects. Let me share that screen. It's probably not the best form for me to get into the weeds on it, but it is a good visual to answer some of your questions that you have about what's printed. What is printed is just printed directly from the website. It's also very small
Is
print.
there a reason it stops at Hendersonville?
Yes, that's what Henderson.
I thought you were trying to, yeah. Take out Smyrna.
Well, Hendersonville took
Money for the rest of us.
took the rest of the money. No.
Wait till Jake left.
That's a good question. Let
I was
me,
kind of panicking down there. Jamie said he was good with it. He was good with it. Yeah. Is it the same on the website too?
Told her she needs to change the name of it now.
let's see if the database includes anything past Hendersonville.
Yes.
So the tab that we printed for the handout is the second tab here. This does not require a login. There are some features that do. This is not one of them. You've been mostly working in this RTP projects tab. Same list of projects, just different columns associated with those projects. The second tab is helping us better track our progress towards identifying funding allocations for your projects. The first tab is more about describing those projects as they were submitted.
Was the second tab the one that does not have everything?
I think that was just a print issue.
Only the first page was printed. Michael, if you go all the way to the top, you see it says page 1 of 4. If you keep going there, then
Yeah, so
the
now
other
I've
projects,
expanded.
it just seems like it was just page 1.
Yeah.
So now we're going all the way through Wilson County. But it's all here. So let's,
Okay.
with Mayor Anderson's question, let's walk through these columns. This is just a subset of the fields that are available if you were to click into any of these projects. I'll click on this Berry Hill project. I'm going to actually start here. So the first part of this page is just basic information about your project. Most of this is what you have provided to us in terms of the project name, the project description, the termini. If you provided a distance or we calculated that for you, that would be here. The location of the project in terms of counties, jurisdiction, links to the application that you submitted to us online, links to the tip if the project's in the tip. And then we get into the cost information, which I think is important to dwell on here. There are two costs right now. There's the cost that you supply to us. Often that was from just a rough planning estimate. You're just kind of ballparking it. Or maybe TDOT had done a TPR or APR. Matt, what are we calling this?
Yes.
Both, all of the above. A planning report that, and so TDOT estimate might be a source, for example, that you'll see listed here under the source. The best source of information for a cost estimate is going to be an engineering analysis, like as you've gotten into the NEPA work. That's the most accurate from pre-construction phases. We rely a lot on that because it took into consideration a lot of the details on the ground and the cross section that you're proposing. But if you didn't give us a preliminary engineering cost estimate, then that's where we really relied on the consultant partners to come up with cost estimates. Their cost estimates are this next section. So the GNRC cost is the cost being provided to us by two consulting firms. We have CDM Smith working primarily on helping us understand construction cost estimates. And we have Finish working with us on right-of-way utilities. I think there are still some projects that they're trying to get enough information to finish their work on, but most projects, I'm getting a battery low warning, are there. So I'm going to show you how you can compare those two costs more quickly than looking at the project details page. But staying on this page, if you go down, the next section is where we have begun to allocate funding to your project. It's not yet a recommendation from staff to the board. It's intended to be a representation of your funding needs, married with our understanding of the timing of that project. And if you already have a commitment from a grant program or a state commitment, we will provide that detail. Our intent is to provide that detail in this funding table. But if you don't see a fund code or a year, it's just because we're just trying to document what you said you needed. And those details need to be worked out in relation to the other projects across the region as we move towards fiscal constraint. And then below that, you see project notes. This is discussion between us internally or between you and your team. We're just trying to document discussion along the way. Your team, if they're looking at these projects and they have a question, they can submit questions to us here. So that's logged if people are using that tool. So that's the project note section. So going back to the tables, let's go to this on this first tab. The best place for you to see how far apart we are in cost estimates is the RTP projects tab, the first tab. The last few columns, the second that, you can see on the screen, cost applicant, cost GNRC, those are the two individual cost estimates we have. And the cost difference is the percent variance that we're seeing between these two estimates. And so that's where a lot of our time has been spent recently, is just anything over about 10% variance. We're trying to figure out why there's a variance. And many of you have already told us, take the consultant's estimate or take our estimate, because we just happen to have more information than they do and they're preparing their estimate. So that's, that'll be reconciled. Next time you see a list from us, there will be one cost estimate, because the decision will have been made what dollar amount we're going with.
Yeah.
Primary Stover. It's not you, it's me.
Heard that before. It's all good.
Just
move on back to the back.
Yeah.
Plenty of room back here.
Yeah, there we go. There you go.
I can actually go back.
You rejoin the group.
That's good, you get a raise.
Candy, make a note of that.
Like your way out. Right. So that, looking at the RTP projects tab, that's probably the most important information for you to be looking at. I'm going to go to the second tab though, because that's where we are in the process now, is trying to figure out how to give your projects money, right? And so what you're seeing here is rolled up information for your project. So we're looking at this Berry Hill project. As you've seen before from us, the priority list where we've scored projects and put them into a tier, I've incorporated that information into the database now, so you don't have to go back and forth between handouts. This Berry Hill project is a 4-star project because we've already committed funds to this project historically. And as we see it now, we've allocated $6.9 million of funding in the funding rows for this project. So if I click into this, I'm going to be able to see the detail for how we got to that number. Here we go, 6.9, right? And so this is based on some carryover funding from the last tip into the new tip for fiscal year 2026. You see the phases of work, the grant information, if it was already been identified through a previous tip. And then you also see, it looks like there's additional requested amounts of funds from the applicant for this project that we've gone ahead and logged. It's showing it's requested and not recommended or programmed, because we're just trying to track what you told us you need by phase, by year for the project. So going back to the table, what you're seeing here is the table sums of the project details page. So you can just see the total amount of money that we've allocated. So you see the cost applicant, the cost GNRC, those are the two fields that we just talked about in the previous table. And then you see the total funding, which is just summing the federal, state, and local. Now, that brings me to, Mayor Anderson, you had a question about the local column. That is, if you have told us that you've already pledged local money, we've documented that. And if you haven't told us you've pledged local money, if there's a federal amount associated with it, we've put the required match into that column. So if there's a federal grant associated with your project, we've assumed the 80-20 split, and we've assumed you're responsible for that unless you've already told us that TDOT's covering that. But in some cases, you'll see that the local amount exceeds the 20% of the 80-20 split between the federal and non-federal share. And that's just because you've been pledging local dollars to these projects as well. And we have captured that in the database to the best of our ability and the information that we're looking at. So where we go from here is that we continue to work with you all on getting the funding amounts correct. These are all in today's dollars. And then we start to look at the tiers and the scores and start taking our budget money, turning these requested line items into recommended line items. That then starts to deplete the revenue that we have. We just keep going through the list based on the tier and the score until we exhaust our available money out of that $15.8 billion project. We go as far as we can. indicating which horizon we're funding the project in until we run out of money, and then everything beyond that turns into illustrative. In terms of the horizon, you'll see illustrative there once we get to that point. Illustrative doesn't mean it's not making the plan, it's just not making the fiscally constrained portion of the plan. It may be even more important that the plan is there to advocate for that project's need. So just because your project is going to show it's illustrative doesn't mean it's not in the plan. It doesn't mean it's not a priority. It just means we've exhausted the $15.8 billion that I mentioned. The plan document itself will have strategies described to help you overcome that funding limitation, whether it be going after set aside funds or going after discretionary grants or pursuing local dedicated funding or reconsidering the proposed cross section to something that might be a little bit more affordable in the short term. But the next time you see us in early 2026, that you will see this table again. These amounts will be finalized, and the horizon column will include either 2030, 2040, 2050, or show illustrative. And that will be compared to the revenue to demonstrate that fiscal constraint. But you can see the challenge in front of us, which is that we don't know what cost estimate to go off of. We don't know what that gap is between what you've already received in terms of funding if you're already in the TIP and where you're trying to get. One more thing I'll point out on this list, because I know some of you might have this question. We're mostly focused on the on-road improvements with known termini or changing cross sections. The way we treat greenway projects and transit projects is a bit different, except in the case where transit is an on-road improvement. Those are included in this list. But so the vehicle acquisition project or a greenway project that's off-road, we will identify all of those as needs. The transit money is attached directly to the FTA funding that we'll account for. And then the greenway projects will be identified as illustrative priorities for discretionary grants and programs that TDOT's Transportation Alternatives Program, or you saw the Multimodal Access Fund, Matt, the state revenue program, multimodal still around. Yeah, so we can't speak for that money now. We just need to say, these are the projects that our region intends to submit to those calls as TDOT issues the call for projects for their set aside grant programs. That makes sense? Right.
Are the transit and greenway projects, are those included in the draft that goes for review or?
So all of the programmatic transit stuff for vehicle replacement, as an example, those we just fully allocate we've got vehicle replacement, we've got the ADA paratransit, we've got the JARC, all that will be fully allocated with the formula funds. It'll just be a 1-for-1. It will just basically the amount budgeted will equal the amount available revenue based on the policies that we've worked on with you all. Now, you do have some itemized projects, particularly associated with the Choose How You Move program that will show up on this list because they're an on-road improvement.
Yeah, so those, but I guess my question was, those are going to be included when you put the draft together to go out for review. Okay.
Yeah, the budgeting on those is just a little bit easier than the budgeting on the on-road improvements. All right, that's a lot. And I know a lot of the folks around this table aren't the ones looking at this website on a day-to-day basis. What questions do you have that would give you answers to today or through your team over the next couple of days? I think the most important thing is for you to look at this list and make sure all of your projects are here.
That we're on it.
Okay. If it's not here, and we've shown that we go past Hendersonville, it's not on our radar.
No problems for me.
Hey, when everybody's talking to their staff about this proposed plan and they have questions and they have not been engaged in this, who's the contact here at GNRC? Who they emailing, calling
I
about
would
getting me on the
email
plan?
both Daniel and Matthew.
Yeah.
You could also email tip@gnrc.org and that team coverage on that email address.
All right, so if you go look at the list, get your staff to look at it, you say, hey, maybe we need to add something. And just get in contact quickly, because if you look at the calendar, we're going to have a final draft in February and plan adoption in March is the current plan. So
Michael, just help educate me more again, whatever, because we don't do this that often. So y'all are going to go to TDOT and TDOT is going to help walk through what portion?
We're first going to focus on the projects that they submitted and make sure we have those appropriately represented. There is some issue still with 10-year plan projects. That catcher, like, I'm not sure we're accounting for that yet because that's a 2033 project. TDOT gave us more detail for projects that are happening 2030 and earlier. There are some longer term projects that are in the 10-year plan where we need more information. They're going to help us with that. There are also projects that have already been in our plan as TDOT projects that are not in the 10-year plan that we just went ahead and said GNRC will sponsor for now, right? We got to talk about that because I get the limitation that Matt and his team has in terms of what they've been empowered to do with the 10-year plan, but we have a 25-year planning horizon. So we just have to figure out how to reconcile that. So that's the first thing we're going to do. The second thing we're going to do is if you have projects on state routes or you proposed an interchange or improvements to an interstate, we got to sit down, talk with them about that. One, the feasibility of them being agreeable to those projects. What would they need to see from us to be agreeable to those projects? So you're not going to want to manage those projects for the most part. Most of you are not going to want to manage those projects. So we're going to, even though we do have a lot to say in where they go next with their money, if they're the implementing agency, we need to have some confidence they're going to be able to do the project and they're going to be willing to do it. So that's the second part of the conversation. And that's the piece that's going to affect what we're seeing in terms of what you've submitted to us.
And what happens if we don't agree with some of the stuff that they are saying or what they want to see? Because ultimately it's our decision, correct?
Yeah, I'd say this is a policy plan. So we're going to lean on the side of communicating your priorities and work it out with TDOT later. The important thing to know about the policy plan, this 25-year plan, is that we'll have another one in 5 years. So we have several bites at the apple before your project's going to start. So we're going to err on the side of making sure your needs are identified, but we're still sensitive to making sure that TDOT is on board conceptually with where we're headed.
Even if we're involved in the statewide partnership program.
It's a small piece of all this. Yeah, it's a small, I mean, we don't have many projects being funded through SPP right now.
There's 13, I believe, total statewide.
And the amount of money that we expect TDOT to spend from the federal programs in our region is well above the cost of the projects that they've given us. So there's a gap. Like, what are we going to do with that revenue? You're defining that through your applications, but we got to sit down with TDOT and just make sure they see it the same way as we do. If they don't, we'll let you know. And if there's something unresolved that's not a fatal flaw, we're going to put it in the plan the best we can and just continue to work on it.
Hopefully that will happen, but
It will. It is right now. Part of it. It's why we exist. There's just inherent conflict in project prioritization, and our job is to be the neutral party to help get to a place where locals in the state have a shared vision for how to use the federal program.
Yeah, I quickly want to add that, you all help feed future 10-year plan projects. This isn't something that TDOT just dreams up and decides that this is what we want. It's a lot of the input that comes from you all, which is another reason why we have our own long-range transportation plan. We have to think the same way. So the partnership is critical to making these happen.
Any other questions for Michael? As we think about this, we're looking for an endorsement on this first draft. No other questions? We have a motion to endorse.
to endorse the full list.
And full list. So we got a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments before we vote?
TDOT is going to abstain from the vote because it's coming to us. I just wanted to make that for the record.
And you don't want to exclude the city of Hendersonville, Matt? You're okay with it being on the full list? Maybe the reserve, you're going to abstain from that one. All right, all in favor say aye. All opposed, all right. Next up is adopting the 2026 MPO calendar. Michael, you want to share a few things on that?
Actually, maybe, Daniel, do you mind doing that?
Sure. Yeah, so we have our calendar that we have drafted here, and this shouldn't be too new to you all. It pretty much reflects the third Wednesday of every other month, starting in January and going through the odd months. Same time, same place, 10:15 a.m. at the GNRC offices for this meeting, the policy board. And then do we have a slide for the TCC as well? Of course, the Transportation Coordinating Committee meets every month, 10:30 at the GNRC offices on the first Wednesday. So no news too much on this, but we have the dates down.
The bylaws require that you adopt a calendar before the first meeting of the calendar year.
Like good on that. So let's have a motion to adopt the calendar.
Move to adopt the calendar.
Complete calendar, Mayor. Do I have a second on that? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions on the calendar? All in favor say aye. All opposed. Next, we move to our reports. Matt, are you doing the TDOT report today?
I jotted a couple things down. First off, as I think you already know, your tip is in for our review right now. I think we're trying to establish a conversation soon to maybe go over some of the things that are still up in the air regarding particular projects. So I just wanted to keep people aware of that. Our planning grant applications have been reviewed and scored, and we should be announcing those either the end of this week or next week of who those recipients will be for this round of planning grants. Another award that is about to come out within 2 weeks would be the Multimodal Access Grants, Improved Capital, and the TAP grants. We should have those out within 2 weeks for this year's award. I did want to sort of preview what we think we're going to do for the future call for these, is to basically group them into one call and evaluate those as one whole entity and determine what funding source best fits with that. So the awards will be a little bit different in the coming years, but
That's better.
yeah, I think it's something that having all these different, we might even discuss even the planning grant side of things too, but that's all I have.
Thank you, man. Next, we'll go TCC, Jonathan.
Nothing much to add. It's pretty working on the same thing, trying to get the technical details done. I would just reiterate to everyone here to get with your technical staff and make sure they're looking at these numbers. It's a lot of data. And as the technical person for Franklin, it's a lot of data to go through. So please reach out to them and make sure that they're going through these numbers. It's very ambitious what the GNRC is doing this time around. I think it'll be great for the long term. Just it requires a lot of effort on everybody's part to go through those and make sure you're verifying those.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that. Under the chair's report, a couple items that asked me to talk about, that the election of officers is coming up. And so they're going to do the appointing of the 3 past chairs to serve as a nominating committee. And they'll present a slate for consideration at the January meeting. And so that'll be Billy Bogle, Mary Esther Reed, and Randall Hutto will be serving as that nominating committee for that. Thank you for your willingness. If you just now found out about that, I'm sorry. And congratulations on that. Also, appreciate everybody that could be there last week for the reception. Congratulations to Rogers Anderson and Billy Bogle on their awards. Appreciate both of them and seeing them here today. Thank you for all of that you've done. And then just as a reminder, we're going to be doing our programming committee December 17th. So if you're on that particular board, hopefully you had your invite for that, and it'll be a virtual meeting as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael for staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to congratulate Mayor Anderson for your recognition, achievement, excellence and achievement for all your work trying to bring more resources to local governments to pay for transportation. I feel really optimistic about the upcoming session, the support from the governor. move forward on some version of what we worked on last year, try to get more state aid back to cities and counties. So you deserve to be recognized for that and everything else that you've done. In your time as a part of GNRC, and then Mayor Vogel, if you don't know, was the 3rd ever inductee to our Regional Hall of Fame. He's recognized as a pillar of their region.
Let me say something. Your cards and your prayers, phone calls, texts, right now is the only medicine I'm getting. So y'all don't know how much it means to me. And I appreciate y'all for that. And the award, I feel like I'm underdeserving. But it really made my wife and me very happy. The film that you took, and that means a lot to me. The best days of being mayor is sitting here with y'all. It really is. And I said, well, Robertson County must really suck. But I'm serious. We're like a fraternity here, and we all know each other. I mean, when I come in here, I was pretty green. I mean, I sat next to Roger Anderson, and he asked a question like he just did a minute ago. I'll never forget his resolution. And after he asked it, 2 or 3 people then started asking questions. He looked at me and said, ain't nobody even read the thing. And I'll never forget, I went, because I hadn't read it either. You had not the best with that guy. And while you're cackling, walking out to the parking lot, I didn't know where to park. I didn't know nothing. And this lady over here comes by in a car in the passenger seat, got her arm stuck out and said something about, rookie, you'll learn. And she cackled about like Wicked Witch of the West and kept on going. But I have learned a lot from everybody here. I've carried it back to Robertson County as a county commissioner for 20 years. I didn't know what all GNRC did. I seen the dues, wonder what we paid dues for. And I went back now that I'm mayor, and I told them what y'all do is very important. I've got them all on board. I've carried Michael and them to my mayor's meeting where I have 10 mayors in the room and explain to them what their dues does, and they need to be used. So, it's just, man, it's been an honor to serve with y'all. It really is. Thank you, Michael. Pick on this guy right here. I never could say his name right because everybody in this room would come to me once a month and tell me how to say it. And it's all wrong. They just, he had people that work with him sitting behind him rolling in the floor. So I just call him Matt.
That's a good decision. Well, his own advice to you was a little off because he's like, it's Missouri with a V. Missouri V.
Still works.
For Mayor Vogel, I just think not only are you sharp and brilliant when it comes to helping us through these challenges, I think when I talk to mayors about their time serving with you since you've been mayor, I don't know how many of them knew you as commissioner, but I think, what you're really being recognized for is just your approach to working with people, the humility you bring, the sense of humor you bring. You take things seriously, but also want to make sure people understand they're in it together and that they have a good time doing what they do, and just unparalleled.
Found out I had to have an ADA plan. Robertson County hadn't started one yet. That was embarrassing because we was the only one in the state. And y'all bailed me out. I thought, oh, I can do this. And I seen what it was. Well, I can't do this. I called GNRC and they did it for me. And saying these people, you need to use them. You really do. I appreciate the capital.
Thank you, Mayor. But we had a great night, I thought, at Nissan Stadium. 250 of our closest friends and colleagues, elected officials, university nonprofit partners, celebration of the work that we do together, honoring our champions. But I gotta give a big shout out to the team. I mean, that was no less than 30, 40 people that put that on, and Michelle Lacewell and her leadership, all the planning and preparation that went into that, her comms team and her outreach team were a big part of it. Also, at the event, we released our annual report. I think we've got copies for you all today. print, but it's also online. A lot of work goes into that to showcase the things that we do together, the impact that we have across Middle Tennessee. And Michelle and her comments, this is all in-house work. Very proud of production quality and proud of the work that it represents as managed by our department heads and program managers and associate and senior professionals here at GNRC, 85 professionals across the atrium. If you haven't been over there, you're welcome anytime. Browse the office and meet the crew. Moving on through the report, that I just also want to thank the team and your teams for, Jonathan said it, we're taking a much deeper dive into these projects than we ever have before. Sometimes I'm like, be careful what you ask for. Sometimes we feel like we're a little bit in over our head, and we got a lot of new people around the table. But, we're committed to figuring out where the challenges and the boogeymen are on your project so that we don't stall out once we get them into the tip. And that's one of the key takeaways that we got from the project delivery task force. So we appreciate your patience waiting through all of that, but I think it'll be worth it on the other end when we come out of it. I think I was going to ask you to share a little bit about where you were this morning and your participation in the ULI workshop. And then aside from that, that's my report.
Yeah, just headed straight over here to the meeting from Urban Land Institute Nashville workshop about transit-oriented development. So very, very interesting topic. The Greater Nashville Realtors had one recently as well, and I think this is kind of a reviving this topic after the success of the Choose How You Move funding. We're really thinking about how to transit-oriented development tie in land use into making transit work. How do we spur economic development around those transit hubs? I think it's a real topic of regional potential. They had several speakers there, but the most interesting one was the executive of the Kansas City Transit, which is a pretty comparable place for population and kind of geography there. And they've been doing really successful transit-oriented development along with some other things in the transit realm for a long time. So very excited to kind of be part of starting that conversation regionally, and we'll keep you all posted on that. Can I say one more thing? Just another point of thanks for all of you and your staff. Mayor Reed alluded to it earlier. The ramp up to this has been constant communication, emails, meetings, smoke signals, and your staff has all been extremely responsive. We have almost 1,000 funding rows, 400 projects that we're going through, and we have to get it all right. So one additional thanks to you, and make sure to send that to your staff as well.
Thank you for that, Daniel.
Some points while y'all were talking. 12 years ago, when I became mayor, Ernest Burgess called me, and Ernest was mayor of Rutherford County. He said, you got to start coming to these meetings. Y'all are missing out in Smyrna. And I've thought about that over the 12 years. How do we engage some of the people that don't know that they're supposed to be sitting around this table with us? And, it may be that they don't know it, but they could send somebody. So is there something we can do with those communities that are able to be part of this board and this committee, whether it's us individually reaching out to them? What is our best way, do you think, to get more involved? Because we're stronger collectively than we are individually. So what is there that we can do?
I do think that peer-to-peer encouragement is really important. Also, I'm going to deviate a little bit because I think another thing that's really important is as you, one of these days you're going to decide you're finished as an elected official. You don't want to do it anymore. Hopefully it's your choice, right? But one of the things I really appreciate about Mayor Vogel's situation was that Howard Bradley brought Mayor Vogel to the meeting, introduced everybody, and set him up for success. So one, just thinking about your succession plan when it comes to regional engagement, which I think starts with just educating your local legislative body. So it doesn't have to be me and 50 slides. It could be somebody else on our team, but just getting us in front of your local legislative body, I think is really important. But when it comes to like your adjacent communities, I think the peer-to-peer encouragement is really important. And I think maybe we can be more aligned with our communication. So if we're noticing a neighboring community that isn't participating, maybe we should start thinking more about, I should reach out to Mayor Reed about so-and-so. Maybe we could do that together so that they're getting different directions, but.
I would like that if there's, I mean, I know of one that currently that participate. And so I think there may be others that we're just not thinking about, hey, they probably need to be coming to the meeting too. So if you could let us know that.
There's a lot of confusion. We spent a lot of time letting folks know it's okay if the mayor can't come. You know, like you can have a designated alternate. Even if that individual isn't voting, to take that information back to the community is almost as critical as our votes, because we mostly vote consensus basis anyway. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I know that's some of the work we're doing with the board of directors, is thinking about how to make sure everybody's aware of the value and the benefit.
Well, I think how important this is, but I also know TCC is probably even more important. And I just think about those communities that may not have a representative there and how beneficial that is to work with your peers on moving projects forward. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, appreciate those comments, Mayor. And I think part of it, maybe we just need to do a little bit better campaign on the benefits. And I know that maybe some of your communities have heard it, county commission, city councils, no disrespect to Nashville, but it gets often said, hey, GNRC, if you're just part of that, they're just trying to make your community like Nashville, right? And why would a rule, and I'm just saying, but that gets said oftentimes and in county commission meetings, city council meetings, why would I want that? I don't have nothing to do with that, right? Well, they're missing out on benefits for Department on Aging and just the grants, everything that goes along with that. And maybe those little one-page bullet point things. This is what we offer out of GNRC to communities. How do we benefit your community? We've got some that are like, why are we funding anything to go with GNRC? Why are we paying any dues? That's a common conversation that's had. And some have said, we're not going to pay. Right? And it's been a battle back and forth. And I'm sure we can do a better job of reaching to those around us and sharing that. So thank you for that. Any other business before we adjourn today that we need to know? Listen, I hope you all, you have somebody?
What? Should we recognize Mayor Hutto for winning the ugly sweater contest this morning?
Did you?
Take it off.
I've got it to show.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. Out back.
That's right. Well, listen, I hope all of you have a blessed time as you move off into Christmas season, and for you families and you personally and your communities. And the Lord just continues to do great things for you in your lives. So looking for one more motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor say aye. Thank you. Have a great Christmas.